What's up everybody, this is the 2024 Alfa Romeo Tonale. So about the Tonale, well, it's this brand new subcompact crossover for Alfa Romeo here, the more affordable vehicle that they badly needed here in the lineup. And here in the United States, it's available only with a plug-in hybrid setup, which is really cool. It's the first electrified Alfa Romeo we have here as well. And so as far as the styling though on the Tonale, I think it looks fantastic. I mean, I love those headlights there with the LEDs, the triple LED rings you have there on both sides, and the Alfa Romeo grille, and just everything about this, especially in this green color, just looks so nice from every angle in my opinion. And this is sharing the same platform with the Dodge Hornet, and I mean, dimensionally, as far as most of the sheet metal, they're identical, but I have to say that this is definitely the better looking of the two in my opinion. Just so classy and so sharp up front there, and just looks really nice. Coming down to the sides here, you have these 20-inch wheels, which are a $2,000 option here on top of this top Veloce model that we have here. These 20s are nice, but you know, again, $2,000 is kind of steep, but they look great, and they're also a nice way to show off those Brembo brakes that are hiding behind those wheels there that you get as an upgrade here on this Veloce model as well. And the side profile here looks really nice. I like how you have a little Italian flag there in the side mirrors there, and just a nice side silhouette there. The windows, the way it kicks up towards the rear there is a cool touch, although whenever you're opening that back door, it's not the best because it is almost at head height as far as, you know, opening that up. You have to make sure you don't smack yourself with the door there. But aside from that, I love the side profile. The back end is also really sharp, really nice looking there. I love the full width tail lamp and the detailing within those tail lights. And you know, you have the dual exhaust there, which is something with the Veloce model here. You get the sport exhaust, which is a nice upgrade as well. And yeah, so from every angle, I think it's a really nice vehicle. It's on the larger side for a subcompact crossover, so it still has nice proportions, and you know, it doesn't feel too cramped on the outside or on the inside. And overall, I think it's just a really nice looking little car. The interior of the Tonale is a pretty nice place to be. So it's obviously very modern, being a brand new vehicle here, brand new interior design, and it works really well for the most part. But first thing, sitting down in these seats, this one has these top leather seats that are perforated. They're ventilated as an option here. They're also heated, and they have the lumbar adjustment, and they're pretty comfortable seats. They're a little bit on the firm side. This one's got just under 5,000 miles. Maybe if you break them in a little longer, they'd feel a little more comfortable, but they are definitely a little firmer than, you know, what you might find in an average luxury subcompact crossover. But moving on to the steering wheel here, this is, I think, my favorite part of this whole interior. This steering wheel is fantastic. It's the same wheel you get from any other Alfa Romeo in the past, which is a very good thing. I love the start button here on the wheel, and you know, a great 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches, a flat bottom, the metal on the wheel. But these metal paddle shifters, they're thick and they're huge and heavy, and they just are at the perfect placement as well. And I love that they're column mounted still. This is something that you know, they've been doing for a while. A lot of other steering wheels, almost 100% of the other steering wheels out there from any performance car company or anything, is usually mounted to the steering wheel these days. So having one on the column is great because you always know where they're at. I still prefer column mounted shift paddles, and these ones are just glorious. Outside of the exotic supercars, these are the best paddle shifters in the industry, in my opinion. I love them, and that's something that you only get here as an option on the TI trim, or as standard here on the Veloce. You don't get them on the base trim, but they just do the manual shifting and that's it. But oh, I love these paddles. Anyway, moving on to the gauge cluster here. I really love the gauge cluster as well. It's a 12.3-inch display, and it has a few different views, so you can change how it displays the information. But the unique one here, especially for the Alfa Romeo, is that you have the vintage looking dials there, which is a throwback to the old Alfa Romeo models of the 60s and 70s. And me being a retro lover, I love the way those look. But it's great. You have a few different looks there to customize it however you like it. And on the right hand side there, you have a few basic things you can change, and in the middle you can change some stuff, but that's about it. I wish there was maybe a little more customization if I'm being nitpicky, but overall I think they're just great gauges. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, you have this 10.25-inch touchscreen display right at the top here. It has standard wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto. This screen is standard, by the way, and it's a really nice screen, nice and thin with, you know, no bezels or anything. And I think it's kind of nicely integrated. It's not just stuck onto the top of the dash. It's, you know, kind of dips down a little bit here. And as far as the software goes, it's the Uconnect 5 system, which is okay. But as you can see, even with me just flipping through the menus here, every once in a while, it's a little slow. There's a little bit of a delay with loading the page that I selected. These days in 2023, you know, in 2024 model year vehicles, usually most stuff doesn't have any kind of lag or delay, and they're all really quick and snappy. So I think at this point, it's a little inexcusable for it to be that slow. Hopefully there will be some software updates or something to make it a little snappier, but it's good with the customization. You can have different widgets on there, and everything is pretty logically arranged. If you don't want to use the smartphone integration, you know, all the other built-in stuff is pretty easy to use. The only other complaint I will say is that you do have to go into a sub menu in order to turn on your heated and cooled seats and your heated steering wheel. And, you know, it's just, I still wish there was just buttons for those things. You do have this row of climate control stuff there for the other climate functions, which is nice to have at least. And beyond that, you just have a wireless phone charger here. And it's kind of interesting how it's a stand-up kind of setup versus the usual lay-down ones. I'll be testing that out this week to see how that actually works, but it's nice and large. Other storage spaces here in the doors, you have a decent-sized bottle holder. You also have two cup holders here in the middle, and you have the center armrest, which is nice and softly padded, and a really deep space. It's kind of narrow, but it really goes way far down there, so that's nice to have. The only other thing in this area, though, that I will complain about very briefly is you have no padding down by your knees. And some others in this segment don't either, but even like some non-luxury subcompacts, like the Honda HR-V, for example, has padding down by your knees here, and this doesn't. That would have been a nice way to differentiate this over the Dodge Hornet and make this feel a little more luxurious, because aside from, you know, some of the trim and, you know, the badging you see on a few things, you know, it's basically the same interior as the Hornet for the most part, and, you know, no upgrades in materials really otherwise. So a little bit of a bummer there, you know, so it would have been nice if they dressed this up a little bit more to justify the slight extra cost of this over the Dodge Hornet RT. But anyway, moving on to the back seat here in the Tonale. It's a pretty good sized back seat for a subcompact crossover. It's one of the larger ones out there. I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I'd say I have about 2 inches of legroom or so to spare back there. And headroom, I have a little bit of space there. It's not the roomiest though still, I don't think. You know, again, especially if we're not talking about luxury crossovers, but even like some of the regular subcompact stuff in this segment does have a little bit more space for some of them. But overall, pretty good for this size of vehicle. And if you want more space, you can go up to the Stelvio that Alfa Romeo still offers. That does give you a little bit more space there. But anyway, looking forward, you'll see air vents and another USB and USB-C jack there. There's a fold-down center armrest, the 2 cup holders, and pockets in those doors as well. The trunk space in the Tonale is pretty good as well. Again, a little larger than some of the other average, you know, subcompact crossovers in this segment. But I also have to add that, you know, like a Mercedes GLB still has a lot more space than this does. So this is by no means the king in this segment, but you know, a good amount of space still nonetheless. Beneath the floor there, you'll basically just see a little extra cubby there for storing your charging cable here, as well as just, you know, a little fix-a-flat kit there, and that's about it. You know, you can see the rest of it is taken up, I presume, by the battery, but still nice to have, you know, a little bit of extra space there under the floor, and you also have a power outlet there in the cargo area as well. And it is a power closed tailgate as well, but I will say that there's been twice already where I've pressed the button to close it and it doesn't work. I have to do like a double tap in order to get it to actually close. You know, so minor little annoyance there, but anyway, overall, just still, you know, a good amount of cargo space. But let's start up and go for a drive. The Tonale here still uses the same Alfa Romeo key as many of the others have used here for a while, but it's a really nice key. Just, you know, has a little bit of metal on the top and metal on the back here. A little bit of a thicker key, but I think it's actually a really nice key. It has a nice weight to it. And of course, it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit this steering wheel mounted start button, and it starts right up. All right, so setting off here in the Tonale. So the first thing you notice about it, well, if you have any kind of charge in the vehicle, it's going to be starting up in a hybrid mode or an EV mode here. And as long as you're in the normal mode, at least here on the DNA selector, it's going to always default to trying to use that electrical range first before it kicks on the gas engine. And as far as that electric range goes, it's a 12 kilowatt hour battery. It's rated at 33 miles of all electric range. And it's just an E motor there in the rear. It has 121 horsepower on its own. which is substantial and should be enough to do most of your normal driving. As long as you don't need maximum performance, it should be okay. And if you want to recharge that battery on a normal house current plug, it'll take, they claim 8 hours or so. It was telling me about 12 and a half from a dead battery. And then if you want a faster charge though, with a level 2, it can charge in as little as 2.5 hours, they claim. So, you know, great with that flexibility there if you do really want to use that electric range. And you know, in the EV mode here, it's really nice and quiet. And thankfully, the brakes feel really nice and normal. Sometimes with plug-in hybrids and EVs, even in general, the brakes can sometimes feel a little weird because it's trying to regenerate some of that electricity back, you know, through those brake pads into the battery. And this still feels totally normal. Throttle response is also nice and responsive as well. And speaking of the throttle, if you do floor it, then it will get rid of the EV mode and just give you the gas engine and just give you, you know, full power if that's what you need. Other things here to note though, so you have some nice light steering. Now I will say that it is slower steering than other Alfa Romeo. So if you're used to the Stelvio or the Giulia, this isn't going to feel quite as sporty. And that's the one disappointment. It's an easy thing to change. They could have made the steering ratio quicker in this to make it feel more like an Alfa. Maybe they just want to go for a more mainstream feel here with this. I don't know, but that's one of the things I really loved about the Giulia and the Stelvio, and to not have it here in this is a little bit of a bummer, but we'll talk more about the handling once we get onto a back road. Other things though, visibility is pretty good. You have fairly thick A-pillars here for something like this, and the mirrors are right at the A-pillar as well, so not the best from corner visibility, but nice large windshields still, and view out of the back is pretty good. You also do have lots of safety tech, and there's even extra packages to add more stuff. You can get, like for example, as an option, a surround view camera, and you have adaptive cruise control here, and many of the other stuff is standard automatic emergency braking and all that, blind spot monitoring, you know, all those things to help you out. There's park sensors, lots of assistance there if that's what you want. But it's also just, you know, I mean, we're climbing a hill here. I have enough electric juice here to get up the hill, no problem. But we're going to go and do an acceleration here. So I only have about 5 miles of electric range, and supposedly you need about 80% battery to get maximum performance out of the vehicle. But putting it into the dynamic mode does stiffen up the dampers here. You have adaptive dampers, 2-mode dampers here in the Veloce model exclusively. But you put it in that dynamic mode, it stiffens up those dampers, stiffens up the steering, and sharpens our throttle response a little bit, and also just you know, kicks on the gas engine, so again you have that maximum attack. But let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. A little bit of a delay. There we go. All right, accelerating pretty good there now, and just didn't want to kick down there for a split second for whatever reason. Yeah, it's a little bit of a delay and a disconnect between, like, I put my foot down, it's like, okay, and then it's like, okay, now we'll go. And it's a little bit of lag there. Some of it's partially just because, you know, as far as the engine component goes, we have a 1.3 liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Impressively though, it does 180 horsepower on its own, and then combined with that 121 horsepower e-motor, you would think you would have, you know, about 300 horsepower or so, but unfortunately they don't make peak power at the same time. So peak power is right around 285 horsepower, but you do have 364 pound-feet of torque, so a really good amount of punch there as far as that goes. Now, as far as launching, you might have a little bit of a more exciting launch with the Dodge Hornet RT, because that does have a power shot mode, which is like an overboost function. It gives you an extra 3 horsepower and an extra, I believe, like 34 pound-feet of torque, makes it, you know, a good bit punchier there. But supposedly in car and drivers testing, it doesn't improve the 0 to 60 time, and this and the Hornet RT have an identical 5.5 second 0 to 60 time here, which is, you know, pretty impressive for, again, we're talking about a subcompact crossover. Most of the stuff in this segment isn't super punchy. There are some that are quicker. For example, there's the, you know, GLA 35 and 45 and the GLB 35 and 45. You know, those are going to be a lot higher performing. So once you get into this luxury segment, you know, it's certainly, as far as regular stuff goes, this is the most powerful, but once you get to those actual performance versions of some of those competitors, you know, there are some more powerful options out there, but none of those offer a plug-in hybrid like this does. This is really the one that's ahead of the curve with what we'll be seeing a lot more of in the future, of electrification providing the extra punch instead of a big motor or a ton of boost from some giant turbo or something. But anyway, we're on this road that generates some more road noise typically, and, you know, I have to say that it's still fairly quiet and refined for, you know, something in this segment as well. But we're coming up some corners here that I always take, and let's see how the Tonale handles. So in addition to these sportier dampers, we also do have on the Veloce here Michelin Pilot Sport 4 all-season tires, and you know, so that is all going to help you along with having those Brembo brakes. They're 4-piston Brembo brakes to give you, you know, sportier handling, better braking capability there, and just a little bit of extra grip. And I mean, these are still heavy though. This being a plug-in hybrid, that's one of the huge downsides, but man, it really rocketed out of that corner nicely with that extra punch from the electric motor. But you know, these weigh, I think, just under 4,300 pounds, which isn't horrible, but when you're talking about something this small, I mean, all the other non-plug-in hybrid competitors are going to be hundreds of pounds lighter because they don't have a, you know, big battery to tote around, but they also don't have the electric range. So it's just going to come down to your priorities as far as, you know, what you would rather sacrifice in order to get what you want. But you know, so steering, I still, yeah, I wish it was a little quicker and just a little sportier with it set up. And, you know, I actually just had a Stelvio for a week earlier this year, and, you know, the handling is nowhere near the Stelvio. And, I mean, that's okay. Again, this is supposed to be more affordable. It's smaller. You know, it's not going to be as good as the Stelvio because it's lower in the hierarchy. But when you look at the actual pricing, even for the refreshed 2024 Stelvio, you're really only talking about maybe a $2,000 difference between this and the Stelvio. And so again, it comes down to, you know, do you want that electric range? Do you want this futuristic powertrain? But, you know, for me, it's really hard to justify this over a Stelvio just because, you know, first impressions there on these corners, the Stelvio handles miles better. It's similarly quick, just no electrification, but 280 horsepower in that. So right there with this, actually slightly more horsepower than this, more space. And so the cliff notes here is that I think as much as, you know, the Tonale is a nice addition, it's just too expensive. And, you know, this one, as tested, by the way, is about $57,000. It's just so close in pricing to the Stelvio. When you're up, you know, with these kind of price ranges, 50 grand plus, what's 2 grand more for a car that handles better, has more space, more power? You know, it just, that's really the struggle for me with the Tonale here. I mean, it drives fine. I have no complaints with it. You know, I was totally content with the Hornet as well. You know, and in the dynamic mode here, these dampers, you know, they're a little stiff, but it's what you're wanting out of a dynamic mode and a sporty driving experience, so I don't have any complaints there with that. But while we are still in the dynamic mode here, I'm going to go ahead and put it into the manual mode, and this runs through a 6-speed Eisen automatic transmission. It's normal torque converter, so we will try out the manual shifts here, see how it is. Yeah, slow with the responses, and that's another thing. Sorry to come back to the Stelvio, but the Stelvio has the awesome ZF 8-speed automatic, very quick and snappy with its responses, one of the best automatic transmissions, period, in the industry, in my opinion. This is just worse. There's no other way to say it. So another reason why I think, you know, paying a few bucks more for a Stelvio makes a ton of sense if you are someone who wants to do manual shifting or just wants to have a sportier experience, or even if you don't, again, just for the extra space. You know, I think that there's a very strong case to be made for the Stelvio still, even though, again, it's an old vehicle. It's been out since 2017. It doesn't matter because they refreshed it. You have the same digital gauges here for 2024 and those. The screen's a little smaller in the middle, but it still does all the same basic stuff. It really is going to come down to, do you want the plug-in hybrid thing? I think that is really the only thing about this vehicle that really sets it apart and is going to convince people to get this over a Stelvio if you do cross shopping. I mean, there's a lot of people that just like the new styling and all that, and that's fine. Otherwise, everything else in the Tonale here is fine. You know, it's pretty comfortable. We'll go ahead and put it back into the natural mode here. And surprisingly, one of the nice things about the dynamic mode as well is that it does charge the battery, and anytime you also have an e-save mode here, which will also charge the battery if you want to save your electric range for a specific point in time. You know, but when you're in dynamic mode there, it's going to be keeping that gas engine on, and so whenever the gas engine isn't working to propel you forward, it's charging the battery, and also the regen braking is going to really help with adding more juice to the batteries. Like, I started driving here with about 5 or 6 miles of electric range, and now I'm up to 9 thanks to that dynamic mode there. But it's just nice that you have the electric range. So it is really nice, and it gives you instant response. The only other thing I will say though is that, you know, whenever you do want to be in that electric mode, it's just an e-axle in the rear. So you're going to have rear wheel drive when you're in electric mode. So if you're commuting in a snowy place, you know, just keep that in mind. You're not going to be able to use that electric range all the time, you know, in those snowy conditions. You're going to have to go into the hybrid mode and kick on that gas engine to propel the front wheels in a slippery, you know, circumstance where rear wheel drive isn't enough. I'm also noticing a slight switching through the wheel, like a little bit of torque steer, because again, you have all the power from the gas engine going through the front wheels exclusively. There's no connection to the rear. It's just the e-motor is the only thing spinning those back wheels there. It's all minor stuff. It drives fine otherwise, and again, if you're just excited about the Tonale, you know, I have no giant complaints with it. It's fine. But anyway, we're out on the highway here now, just cruising, and this does have the adaptive cruise control system, so we'll go ahead and turn that on. It does also have the lane keeping assist function here. It's not hands-free or anything, but does do some steering assist for you here, which is nice. And you know, it works fine so far. I will say though, when I had the Hornet for a week, the sensors got a little messed up by even just the rain, and it did give me a failure in that. We'll see, again, testing this out this week, how the Tonale does, but it's all the same tech, so just that's why I'm mentioning stuff about the Hornet here, because there's no differences between this and that as far as, you know, all the sensors and stuff, but it all works really well. The only other little thing I will mention about the technology here, and the safety tech especially, is that it has speed limit recognition with, you know, it'll tell you the signs, but because this vehicle is Italian roots, it still every once in a while wants to default to Italian speed signs. And so when I'm going through a park, for example, just a little bit earlier there, it was telling me I had a 9 km/h speed limit there, and even in my driveway it said I had an 18 km/h speed limit for some bizarre reason. So I don't know where it's seeing these imaginary European road signs here, but just a funny little glitch here. I'm assuming that'll be fixed with a software update at some point. But just one other thing I wanted to mention is, you know, the tech isn't 10 out of 10 as far as its intelligence. But the last thing to mention here about being on the highway is that, you know, whenever you are just cruising, you know, I'm sitting here, you know, at just regular highway speeds, it's able to maintain these speeds in electric mode, going up mild hills and all that. You know, so the electric range is very much usable. It's just going to come down to how you drive, where you're using it, and all of that, you know, as far as your throttle demands. But, you know, it is a good amount of punch. I still think, you know, as far as other plug-in hybrids, it's not one of the best ones out there. Like I think a RAV4 Prime has more punch, that has a dedicated EV mode where you can go full throttle, do full highway merges in electric mode, and it's great. You know, and that's actually pretty similar in price to this. It undercuts it a little bit, but if you really want a good plug-in hybrid SUV, I still think it's not one of the best ones out there. But if you want it in this luxury segment, you know, it's basically one of the only ones out there, and it's great that they offer this. And you know, it is pretty good. It's, you know, more usable than a lot of the plug-in hybrids that came before from other companies. You know, this is a good amount of electric punch, a good amount of electric range, and you know, overall I think it's pretty well done. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts for now. But thanks to Alfa Romeo, I will have this vehicle for an entire week, so I'm going to drive around all over the place, again, charge up the battery, do some more electric driving, and then I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy and efficiency numbers, as well as my thoughts on the pricing, how it compares to the competition, and anything else I noticed here during my week of driving. Alright, so I've been driving the Tonale for a week now, and I've actually really enjoyed driving it. I enjoyed driving it more than the regular Hornet, the non-plug-in hybrid version that I had for a week. The plug-in hybrid powertrain is one that I really enjoy. Now, it still isn't enough electric power to actually do all of your driving electrically. Even whenever I was really trying to take it easy, it would always, if I just needed a little bit more oomph, it kicked on that gas engine, so I wasn't able to do 33 miles of strictly electric driving. It was always kind of coming on and off at will. This isn't the only plug-in hybrid that does this. Hyundai and Kia's plug-in hybrids do the same kind of thing, where the motors just aren't quite as strong as some of the best plug-in hybrids out there that can do everything like a complete electric car does. But, you know, it's still really nice to have the electric range. I really appreciated it nonetheless. Now, a few other things that I did also really like about this vehicle. First off, it actually got a lot of compliments. A lot of people thought that it was more expensive than it was, which I definitely was not expecting, because whenever I told them, like, this is still, actually this one as tested is about $59,000, just under $59,000, they were surprised. They thought it was going to be like a 70 grand vehicle at least. So, I mean, I guess either that's the paint or the styling. Alfa just really hit it out of the park to make this look really premium. I didn't have that impression, but non-car people out there seem to really think this is a more expensive, in line with a Maserati or something like that as far as the styling. I think that's a huge win for Alfa Romeo, and so, if you're someone just likes making a good impression, especially with this green color, I think this car will certainly do that. And I also really like the ambient lighting at night here. It's really cool. That also impressed people, but it just, is a very creative use of ambient lighting, and I really like that. But there was a lot of little quirks, glitches, you could maybe say, about the Tonale that weren't great here this week, and there's a lot of them. And unfortunately, this is consistent with the same kind of experience I had with the Dodge Hornet. Again, same vehicle underneath, basically, just like all kinds of warning lights left and right. So I had one that was telling me that the side indicators needed servicing, the rear liftgate needed servicing, the automatic emergency braking system was telling me it wasn't able to work whenever I was driving towards direct sunlight, which, is a challenging circumstance, I will admit, but other vehicles that I've done the same kind of driving in don't just say, oh, we broke, sorry, and just like, just warn you that it's not working. And so, all those warnings did go away, but it's still, it's just like not a fun thing. You don't want to see an error message pop up while you're driving in a brand new car, which has, just a few thousand miles on it. So definitely didn't love that. And that wasn't the end of it either. One of the more humorous ones was that it continued to see European speed limits somewhere. This thing still thinks it's in Italy. I don't know why, but that's a humorous one. That, it's like, who cares if the speed limit recognition doesn't work? Not a big deal. But it's just another testament to the fact that the tech in this vehicle is not ready for prime time, unfortunately. And the last one that was actually the most annoying was that even with the headlights on the automatic function, half of the time that I got out of this vehicle in the evening, when the lights were on, I'd get out of it, it would do ding, 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 and like freak out. Like, your lights are on, turn your lights off. I'm like, it's automatic lights. You're supposed to turn them off. Don't ding at me because of something you're not doing properly. And they always turned off on their own anyway. So why the car had a disconnect? Like, oh my gosh, the lights are going to be left on forever whenever it's controlling the lights, and they do turn off. Just, again, weird things, and some of them, again, you can just laugh at, but it's just stuff that you don't see in other vehicles. And the Dodge has the same problem, but these are funny quirks, but I don't have these kind of quirks in 99% of the other vehicles I have for a week. So this isn't like par for the course. This isn't just like, oh, this is an early production one. Everyone else does early production vehicles that are rock solid with almost never having any kind of, warning lights or anything like that. So to me, it's inexcusable, and it's, not okay, especially when you're spending this much money. If we're talking about something that's 30 grand, I could maybe excuse a little easier. When you're talking about almost $60,000 for a subcompact SUV, it better be 10 out of 10 and not just in the looks department, But unfortunately, maybe it's just this vehicle, but again, I have the same thing with the Hornet. Maybe they'll work out these bugs. I'm sure there'll be over-the-air updates and things like that. So maybe a second model year, you'll have less glitches, but it just doesn't give me a ton of confidence because, again, everyone else can get off on the right foot from every other car company, and so I'm not giving Alfa a pass just because it's an early model year of this vehicle. But the last couple things I mentioned here are the fuel economy and the pricing and how this compares to the competition. So as far as fuel economy goes, these are rated at 29 mpg across the board, city, highway combined, all the same. And 29 mpg is good. Now, the way it calculates fuel economy is not consistent because it basically combines my full EV charge that I did plus the 5 miles I had whenever I did the first half of this video, and then from there on I didn't plug it in and was just driving normally. So it combines all that, so I'm getting better than 29 mpg, and it's showing me 34.9 mpg for that combined. Now that's really like an MPGe kind of rating in a way because it's, again, using electric help. It's not just the gas engine. But it just goes to show with my driving here, 193 miles I've done, 113 of those were on gas and 79.8 were on electricity. And I only got 31 miles of electric range actually out of this battery, and then 5 before earlier. So I was able to actually do a good chunk of extra additional electric range just with the hybrid function, coasting, cruising at very low speeds, all that kind of stuff. It actually was able to give me a lot more electric range than just plugging in, which is great. So still a very efficient vehicle, I will certainly give it that. And still, again, for something that's as powerful and fast as this is, as luxurious as this is, being an SUV and stuff, I think the efficiency seems to be actually pretty good for this vehicle. But then the last thing to mention though is the pricing and how it compares to the competition. Like I've alluded to here, the pricing is really the biggest problem with the Tonale. So these start around $44,000 for a base one. This one, as tested, is $58,990, which is basically maxed out with almost everything. This paint's $2,200, the $2,000 wheels, every option you can throw at it essentially. So this is like a worst case scenario from a pricing standpoint. But still, even if you go for a lower option one, it still is really tough to justify. Even if, you go without a few options, you go without the fancy paint and fancy wheels, and you're in the low 50s. Even at that price point, it's hard to justify as well because, again, a 2024 Stelvio, very comparably equipped for a Veloce trim like this one actually, is right around $52,000 as well. Maybe you're paying, I look, as far as cross shopping, maybe like a $2,500 premium for a Stelvio over this. And 10 out of 10 every single day, all day, I would take a Stelvio over this. Like I said earlier, it handles better, it's more powerful, more space, it's just better in all the ways unless you want the electric, range. That is the only redeeming quality of this whenever you're shopping, again, within Alfa Romeo's own lineup. And so that just tells me they just didn't price this well. Now, obviously, it's hard to compare it to all the other competitors because none of them really offer a plug-in hybrid option. So, whenever you're comparing it to all of those, it's going to be, again, you're paying the premium for the batteries and the range, so it's not really a fair comparison to everything else out there. So I'm not going to go into the other competitors because this really doesn't have any solid competitors in the luxury subcompact SUV space. The only potential angle where I can kind of see a little bit of a value proposition here for this is the fact that a Dodge Hornet RT, which again has the same powertrain, same everything essentially, those are comparably equipped only about $1,500 cheaper. And yes, it is cheaper, so you get the same thing just with a Dodge badge for a little less. But I think in that case, actually, this is a good value because you're getting an Alfa Romeo, which kind of bums you up into the entry-level luxury segment, which, some people might consider that debatable, but this is considered an entry-level luxury brand. And I think just for the styling alone, I think the styling is way better on this versus the Hornet. It just feels, since it is an actual Alfa Romeo, the steering wheel and everything, all the switch gear, it feels more Alfa than Dodge. So I think getting the Alfa version for a very minor upcharge and being able to tell people you have an Alfa Romeo instead of a Dodge, I think that kind of holds some value, and I think that's certainly worth the $1,500, over that. So I like that Alfa was aggressive with their pricing compared to the Dodge, but that just wasn't aggressive enough, and maybe Dodge kind of put them in a tricky position there with, them pricing theirs so high. I don't know, but it just sucks that this is unfortunately just really pricey, and even though it doesn't have competitors, just compared to, again, the gas Stelvio, you're really, really going to have to want an electrified Alfa and have no compromise on that, and if those two things are what you must have, this is great. I love it. If you want just the newest thing Alfa has, this is still great. I love it. I enjoy driving it despite all of the little, nuances here. But it just, to me, again, it's no contest. Stelvio all day still, while they continue to offer the Stelvio at its current price point and with its current engine. That's going to go away in a few years, and then the equation will change here. But for right now, definitely, I think the Stelvio is the much better buy for basically the same money. But anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the Tonale. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Alfa Romeo for providing me here with the Tonale to review for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Please leave a like and subscribe to keep these videos coming, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.